A few weeks ago, my fiance and I got back from a week and a half long trip to the UK, and while most of our time was spent in London, we did have about 24 hours that we spent in Scotland. And in today's video, I want to show a bunch of the photos and the videos that I took while we were there. We woke up at about 3:15 to catch a 3:45 bus that took us on a train, that took us on another bus, that took us to our final train station that took us to Scotland.
Tickets ready, downloaded alongside any valid documents. This will speed up the process.
After a 4.5-hour train ride, we made it to Edinburgh, where we got a taxi to our Airbnb. We decided to unwind for a little bit at the Airbnb before we got out and really explored the city. I finished the roll of Fujifilm 400 that was inside of my Leica M2 and loaded a roll of Ektachrome E100. I bought this bulk loaded on eBay, which in my opinion is the best way to shoot slide film. I got like 42 images on one roll of film, which is crazy, but I was averaging around 39 to 40 images per roll, and I was able to buy them for $15 each, which is a couple dollars cheaper than what you can find Kodak Ektachrome from brand new. Also, for those wondering, I did have this guy. This is my Leica M2 with the Kex light meter on top, and then my digital camera was this guy right here. This is the Fujifilm GFX 50S2, and on it I have the Fujifilm GF 35-70, and this was the only lens that I used for all of these photos in Scotland. We took a bus to the area near the Edinburgh Castle, where we explored for a little bit. We got some food and got some coffee. After we had some stuff to eat and drink, we started making our way over to the castle. But before we got there, I had to take some photos of the surrounding areas.
Haven't got a fixed address, that's the problem. We have to put it around.
I threw this lens on my M2, which is a Tokina 100mm f2.8 macro, and I used a Nikon f to Leica M adapter. And while these photos aren't the best, I thought it was a pretty fun little experiment to see if it actually worked. The M2 doesn't have frame lines for a 100mm lens, but it does have frame lines for a 90, so it was close enough. It can sometimes be difficult to photograph things in really overcast lighting conditions because you just have a really big, large blanket of like white above you, and I think Ektachrome E100 did a great job at making sure that the clouds still had detail and that the rest of the image still had a good exposure. I shot 3 rolls of slide film on this trip, and I can definitely say that the Kex light meter really came in handy. Without this light meter, it would have been a lot harder to get proper exposures with slide film, because if you've never shot slide film, you have to be a lot more careful and more intentional with how you are exposing it, because it does have a very limited dynamic range compared to a negative film stock, but this light meter did an absolutely amazing job. So if you are someone who's ever been interested in picking one up, this is me saying I don't think you'll regret it. After spending around an hour and a half-ish at the castle, we decided to move on and keep on exploring Edinburgh. Later on that evening, when we got back to the Airbnb, it rained for a very brief amount of time, but we had a ton of rainbows in the sky. I think at one point we saw 3 rainbows, and one of them was really, really bright, and it stayed visible for probably like 10-15 minutes. The next morning, I decided to wake up really early and go on a little walk by myself. I shot my last frame of Ektachrome E100, and then I loaded my M2 with another roll of Fujifilm 400. I started my walk around 7 in the morning, and it was really nice to almost see Edinburgh from a different perspective than the day before. Obviously, the lighting was a little bit different. It wasn't overcast. We had just really, really beautiful morning sunlight. But the other thing was I was able to get a really good sense of the energy of the city because I feel like since I got up so early, there wasn't as many tourists around. It kind of felt like everyone that I was seeing was a resident. It was a lot of kids going to school, parents going and walking their kids to school, people who were going to work, people who were going on jogs and stuff before work. And so I feel like I got a really good sense of what the city was like when it wasn't packed with tourists like myself. It was a really nice walk, and I didn't have any plans when going on this walk. I kind of just wanted to walk around and explore, and whatever piqued my interest, I followed. So I explored this really beautiful river that ran through the city. And after the river, I walked into this cute little neighborhood. The neighborhood let me back into more of the city of Edinburgh, where I explored for a little bit longer. I feel like I shot through the roll of Fujifilm 400 pretty quickly. I probably had it finished within an hour and a half, which was probably one of the quickest I've ever shot a full roll of film. After finishing that roll of Fujifilm 400, I loaded a roll of Ektachrome E100 back into the camera. But pretty shortly after I loaded that roll of Ektachrome E100 in the camera, I needed to start making my way back to the Airbnb so we could check out. We took a taxi back to the train station and found a little shop that we were able to drop off our bags so we could continue walking around the city and not have to lug a bunch of luggage around. While we were out, I tried my hand at a little bit of street photography-esque images. And overall, I really liked the way that they came out. It was really nice having the sun out because it makes these images look really dynamic, and Kodak Ektachrome E100 I think looks fantastic in a bright, sunny situation like this. The film does a really good job at making the images look very dynamic because of, due to how contrasty the film is, but in my opinion, I think it looks great. One other thing that I want to mention about shooting the Ektachrome E100 in this camera is when I've shot Ektachrome in the past, I've noticed that there's sort of like a cool and almost like greenish cast to the film, which I don't think is a bad look at all, but I decided to put a warming filter on the front of the lens. I can't remember which one it was. I don't know if it's like a Tiffin 81A or an 812. I'll put it on the screen right now so you know exactly what it is. But it's a very subtle warming filter. You only have to compensate by 1/3 of a stop with your exposure compensation, and it adds a bit of warmth and almost a little magenta. It's like a coral-ish filter. And I think the images look really, really good because of it. I kind of feel like it might not be as necessary when the sun's out, because you do get the really warm light from the sun, but I decided to keep it on my camera, or I decided to keep it on the lens the entire time I was shooting Ektachrome E100. I took this selfie, and after that, unfortunately, tragedy struck. I'm being a bit dramatic, but whenever I am holding my cameras, as you can see, this is a pretty short strap. I always have it on my shoulder. I always keep it on my right shoulder, and sometimes that can lead to a little bit of instability. And what happened in this situation is I had my backpack on my shoulder, or my Leica on my shoulder, and I was leaning down to put my bag on the ground and grab something out of it when my camera slipped from my shoulder down to my elbow. And I was able to catch it, which is good, but unfortunately it still tapped the ground. Not very hard. It tapped so light that it didn't leave a mark. Like I can't tell that it hit the ground, but it was still hard enough to knock out the alignment of the vertical and the horizontal rangefinders in the camera. And so that kind of bricked my camera for the rest of the trip, as I wasn't able to calibrate it while we were there. Which really sucks because I brought a ton of film. I brought way too much. I think I brought 18 rolls of film. Please make fun of me, but I had so many plans to shoot a ton of film on this camera while we were gone in the UK and make a bunch of videos from it, but you know, unfortunately that didn't happen. I think it was our second full day on the trip is when I dropped it, and I still had like 6 or 7 more days after the trip, and so because of that I just shot with my GFX for the rest of the trip, which to me is not an issue. I really love the images that I get from the Fujifilm GFX 50S2, but if I'm being honest, shooting with this camera is just more fun for me. I just love the shooting experience from my M2, and yeah, while the GFX 50S2 images look great, it's not as fun of a camera to use as the M2 is. With all that being said though, I really do like the images that I was able to take with the 50S2, and overall, the trip to Scotland was absolutely amazing. For those that might be wondering, the camera that I used to film everything, including what I'm filming myself with right now, it was with the Sigma FP and the TT Artisans 17mm f1.4. Overall, I'm really happy with how all of the images turned out. I absolutely love shooting with this camera. It's definitely my dream camera and I love having it. And pairing the M2 with this guy right here, the Kex KM02 light meter, was honestly a dream setup, you know? I did mention that this came in really handy whenever I was using slide film, but even when I wasn't using slide film and still using Fujifilm 400, this thing was fantastic. I know in the past I've mentioned I used Sunny 16 a lot, which is true, but also having something that can confirm an exposure if I'm second guessing it is really nice. And it doesn't hurt that it looks really good on the camera. It matches the chrome really well, and overall is, I think, a really good match. So let me know what you guys think of the images. Like I mentioned, I really like how they all came out, and Edinburgh was such a special place to visit. I do have at least one more video, maybe even 2 more videos coming out from the rest of the time that we spent in London. Those videos should be coming out in the next week to 2 weeks. So if you're interested in checking those out, please consider subscribing so you know when those videos go live. And yeah, if you guys like this video, please consider checking out other videos on my channel if you guys want to see more of my work. If you want to see more of my work, though not on YouTube, I will leave my Instagram on the screen right now, as well as my website linked in the description below if you are interested in seeing my work off of YouTube. And yeah, I think that's where I'm going to end it. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you stuck around this long, another thank you to you. And yeah. Thank you guys again, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.